There's something timeless about a promise made and a promise kept. In the hardscrabble days of the American West, a handshake meant more than any contract, and a person's word was their bond. This story takes us back to 1883 Wyoming Territory, where the dust was thick, the work was hard, and people built their lives on trust sometimes with strangers they'd never met. It's about a woman who traveled halfway across a continent on the strength of a letter, and a man who understood that duty sometimes asks more of us than we think we can give. But most of all, it's about discovering that the strongest foundations aren't built on grand gestures or passionate declarations, but on the quiet, steady work of two people choosing each other one day at a time. May it remind us that real love is often found not where we're looking, but where we're needed most. The telegraph key had been silent for 17 minutes. Frances Kessler knew, because she'd counted every click of the station master's pocket watch as he checked it. Snapped it shut. Checked it again. The watch made a particular sound, brass on brass, a tiny defeated sigh each time the case closed. She'd memorized that sound during the 6 hours she'd been sitting on this shipping crate beside the Red Creek Depot platform. Her trunk sat 3 feet away, close enough to claim, far enough to pretend she was just passing through. The afternoon heat pressed down like a flat iron. Her calico dress navy with white pinstripes, the good one she'd saved for meeting Thomas Brennan, clung damp to her spine. The jet buttons down her bodice had grown warm enough to brand. She didn't move to loosen her collar. Moving would acknowledge the stairs. Mrs. Adelaide Finch from the boarding house had crossed to the far side of the platform 20 minutes ago. Kept glancing over, lips pursed like she'd bitten into something sour. The doctor's wife whispered to the milliner. Both looked at Frances, then away, then back again. Let them look. Frances pressed her gloved hands flat against the letter in her lap. The paper had gone soft from handling during the long journey Pennsylvania to Chicago. Chicago to Cheyenne. Cheyenne to here. The creases threatened to tear. She didn't open it again. She knew every word. Dear Miss Kessler, I am a rancher of good standing in Red Creek. I seek a steadfast woman for honest partnership. The work is hard, but the land is fair. If you are of strong character and Christian faith, I would be honored to make you my wife. The pressed wildflower he'd included had been Indian paintbrush, red as a cardinal's wing. It was still folded inside the envelope. Brittle now. Petals gone rust brown. She'd looked at it every day during the 3-week journey west, tried to imagine the hand that had picked it, wondered if Thomas Brennan was the kind of man who noticed wildflowers, or if he'd just grabbed the nearest one to seem romantic. She'd know soon enough. The 3:40 from Cheyenne had arrived on time. She'd watched every passenger step down, drummers with sample cases, a family with 4 tow-headed children, 2 cowboys who'd tipped their hats and moved on, an old woman in black who'd been met by a younger woman in gray, no Thomas Brennan. The station master Herbert Miller, according to the brass nameplate on his desk, checked his watch again. 4th time. The watch made its little defeated sound. Frances counted the planks beneath her feet. 17 boards to the ticket window. The wood was weathered gray, grain raised by years of boot heels and rain. Someone had carved initials into the board nearest her trunk. J, T, plus M, R, inside a crooked heart. The carving was old, darkened with dirt. She wondered if JT and MR had made it, whatever it meant. A bead of sweat traced down her temple. She didn't wipe it away. Her gloves were black cotton morning gloves, though her father had been dead 3 years now. She'd put them on this morning because black made a person look serious. Respectable. Not like someone who'd answer a stranger's advertisement and travel 2,000 miles on the strength of 3 letters and a dried flower. The smell of creosote from the railroad ties was thick enough to taste. Coal oil lamps hung unlit along the platform, waiting for dusk. The telegraph key sat silent behind the ticket window's wavy glass. Then it started clicking. Herbert Miller's head jerked up. He grabbed a pencil, started transcribing. His hand moved fast, then slower, then stopped. He read what he'd written, read it again, looked through the window at Frances. Their eyes met. She knew. The knowledge didn't hit like a blow. It settled, heavy and inevitable, like snow piling on a roof until something has to give. Her hands stayed folded over the letter. Her spine stayed straight. She'd learned a long time ago that breaking down in public gave people permission to pity you, and pity was worse than contempt. Herbert Miller stood, walked to the door, opened it. The hinges needed oil. They screamed like a cat. "Miss Kessler." His voice was kind. That made it worse. "Yes, I've just received a telegram from Laramie." She waited. Let him say it. "It's regarding Mr. Thomas Brennan." The world had gone very quiet. Even the wind had stopped. Frances could hear a fly buzzing near the eaves, could hear Mrs. Finch's dress rustle as she leaned closer to hear. "Mr. Brennan has taken ill," Herbert said. "Pneumonia. He won't be able to travel. Herbert looked down at the yellow paper in his hand. "He sends his profound apologies and asks that you wire him regarding your travel arrangements home." Home. The word hung in the air like smoke. Frances opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I see," she said. 2 words. That was all she could manage. Herbert cleared his throat. "Miss Kessler, I'm sure this is a shock. Mrs. Finch runs a respectable boarding house just off Main Street. Very reasonable rates. Perhaps you'd like to—" "No, thank you." Her voice came out steady. She was proud of that. "I'll be fine." Herbert looked doubtful. Mrs. Finch had crossed back to their side of the platform now, propelled by curiosity stronger than propriety. "My dear," Mrs. Finch said, voice dripping with the kind of sympathy that felt like accusation. "You can't possibly stay at the depot all night. Let me help you to the boarding house. We'll get you settled. Send a wire to your people back east." "I don't have people back east." The words came out harder than Frances intended. Mrs. Finch blinked, stepped back. Frances stood. Her legs had gone stiff from sitting. The blood rushed back into her feet, pins and needles, but she didn't stumble. She smoothed her skirt with hands that didn't shake. "I appreciate your concern, Mrs. Finch, truly, but I'll manage." She turned to Herbert. "Is there a 510 eastbound?" "Yes, ma'am. Gets in around 5:30. You wanting a ticket?" Frances opened her reticule, counted her coins on her palm where both of them could see. $2.47. Everything she had left after 3 weeks of travel. A ticket to Cheyenne cost $42. She'd checked before leaving Pennsylvania. She closed her hand around the coins, dropped them back into the reticule. "No," she said quietly. "No ticket." Herbert and Mrs. Finch exchanged a look. Frances didn't care. She walked to her trunk, sat down on it instead of the crate. The leather was scuffed from the baggage handlers. She could see where the brass corners had been dented. Her initials were embroidered on the side in thread that had once been white but had gone yellow FMK. Frances Margaret Kessler. She folded her hands in her lap, stared at the horizon where the sun was starting its long slide toward evening. The 510 would leave without her. She wasn't going back east. There was nothing there but a banker's son who'd made it clear he was doing her a favor by courting the plain schoolteacher with no prospects. There was nothing there but Sunday dinners that tasted like ash, and a bedroom in her cousin's house where she'd lived on charity since her father died. Thomas Brennan had offered her a future, a place, a partnership. He hadn't come. But the future was still out here somewhere. It had to be. The sun touched the hilltops to the west, turning everything gold and rose and purple, the kind of colors that didn't exist back in Pennsylvania, where even the sky seemed gray. Frances watched the light change, watched the shadows grow long across the platform boards. The telegraph key started clicking again. She didn't turn around. Whatever that message said, it wasn't for her. If you're reading this from your own front porch or fireside, we'd love to know where home is for you. Sometimes the best stories remind us of the places we've put down roots, or the roads we once traveled to find them. The fence post went in crooked. Wyatt Brennan stepped back, squinted at it, swore under his breath. He'd been pounding posts since sunrise, and his shoulders were starting to protest. The mallet was ashwood, heavy, the handle smooth from years of his father's hands before his. He lined up for another strike. The post still looked wrong. He pulled it out, checked the hole, found a rock the size of his fist wedged in the bottom, pried it loose with the iron bar, started over. This was the fourth post in the north pasture line. He had 16 more to go before dark. The old fence had rotted through last winter. He'd been meaning to replace it since March. But there was always something else. The barn door, the chicken coop, the leak in the cabin roof that he'd finally fixed last week, even though nobody was there to care if it dripped. The rock he'd pulled out had a stripe of quartz running through it. He tossed it aside, heard it thunk into the grass. Buck, his gray gelding, lifted his head from grazing, ears pricked toward the eastern rise. Wyatt heard it then. Hoofbeats. Coming fast. He set down the mallet, wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his wrist. His shirt was stuck to his spine. Canvas trousers stiff with dried mud from kneeling. He'd been out here since the sun came up. Nothing but hardtack and creek water since breakfast. Katie Sowers came over the rise on his bay mare. The horse was lathered white at the chest. Katie didn't ride that hard unless something was wrong. Wyatt waited. Katie pulled up 10 feet away. Didn't dismount. The mare blew hard. Sides heaving. Foam on the bit. "Thomas is down," Katie said. The words hung there. Wyatt picked up the mallet again, set it against the post, let his hands find something to do while his mind worked. "How bad? Doc says pneumonia, real bad, can't get out of bed, won't be traveling for weeks." Katie paused. "If he makes it..." Wyatt's jaw tightened. He knew what that meant before Katie said it. "There's a woman waiting for him at Red Creek Depot. Mail-order bride. Got in on the 3:40 this afternoon." Wyatt looked at the fence post, still crooked. He could leave it. Move on to the next. Nobody would see it but him. But it would bother him every time he rode this line, knowing it wasn't right. He pulled the post out again. "How long's she been waiting?" 6 hours, near as Herbert could figure. Thomas was supposed to meet the train." Wyatt reset the post, drove it home with 3 hard strikes, stepped back, straight now. "What's Thomas want me to do?" Katie shifted in the saddle. Doc sent the wire direct. Thomas is out of his head with fever most of the time. Wyatt walked to where Buck was grazing, ran his hand down the horse's neck. The gelding's coat was warm, dusty. He could smell sage on the wind, the mineral tang of the creek a quarter-mile west. 2 days' ride to Red Creek, 2 days back. 4 days of work he couldn't afford to lose with winter coming on. But Thomas was kin, the only family Wyatt had left. He looked back at the fence line. 15 posts still waiting. "She's still at the depot?" Wyatt asked. "Don't know. Herbert sent the wire 2 hours ago." Wyatt unhitched Buck's lead rope from where he'd tied it to a scrub oak. The leather was sweat dark where it had rubbed. "Need to pack," he said. Katie nodded. Started to turn his horse. "Katie." The foreman looked back. "What did Thomas promise her?" Katie's face went careful. "Marriage, within 10 days of her arrival." Something cold settled in Wyatt's gut. The boarding house sat 3 blocks from the depot, white clapboard with green shutters and a porch that sagged in the middle. Wyatt tied Buck to the hitching post out front. The horse's flanks were still heaving from the 2-day push. Wyatt's own legs felt like boiled rope when he stepped down. Trail dust coated his clothes, gritty in his teeth. His boots hit the boardwalk, and he steadied himself on the rail. Mrs. Adelaide Finch answered his knock before his knuckles left the wood. "Mr. Brennan," she said. Not a question. Small towns didn't keep secrets long. "Ma'am, I'm here about Miss Kessler." Mrs. Finch's mouth pursed. "She's in the back parlor. Been there since yesterday evening. Won't hardly eat. Won't talk except to say thank you when I bring coffee." She stepped aside, lowered her voice. "Terrible thing. What happened to poor Sarah? And now Thomas laid up sick. Your family's had a hard run of it." The mention of Sarah's name made Wyatt's chest tighten. He nodded once, said nothing. The hallway smelled like boiled cabbage and lye soap. A grandfather clock ticked near the stairs. The floor was clean enough to see grain in the wood. "Straight back," Mrs. Finch said. "Past the dining room." Wyatt removed his hat. His hair was stuck to his forehead with sweat and trail dust. He'd stopped at the creek a mile out to wash his face and hands. But he still smelled like horse, and 2 days without a proper bath. The back parlor door was open. She sat on a horsehair sofa near the window, a Bible open on her lap. Not reading, just staring at the page. The light from outside caught dust motes floating between them. Her dress was the same navy calico Herbert had mentioned, high collar, jet buttons, hem darkened with trail dust. She looked up when his shadow fell across the threshold. Wyatt stopped, waited for permission to enter. Her face was narrow, pale, with dark circles under eyes that were gray or blue. He couldn't tell in this light. Her hair was brown, pulled back severe under a small hat that had seen better days. She wasn't pretty the way Sarah had been pretty. But there was something in the set of her jaw that made him think of old iron. "Miss Kessler." Yes. Her voice was quiet but clear. Eastern accent. Pennsylvania. If Thomas's letters had it right. "I'm Wyatt Brennan, Thomas's cousin." She closed the Bible, set it beside her on the sofa, folded her hands in her lap, waited. Wyatt stepped into the room. The floorboards creaked. He turned his hat in his hands, felt the sweat-stained band under his thumbs. "Thomas took sick," he said. "Pneumonia. He's down in Laramie with the doctor. Can't travel. Might not be able to for some time." She didn't move. Didn't speak. just looked at him with those gray-blue eyes. "I rode 2 days to get here," Wyatt continued. "Figured you'd want to know direct." "I already know," she said. "The station master received a telegram." "Right." Wyatt shifted his weight. His knee ached where the old injury liked to remind him it was there. "Well, I came to see if you needed help with arrangements." "What kind of arrangements?" "Ticket back east. I can cover the fare if you're short." Something changed in her face. Not much, just a tightening around the eyes. "That's generous." "Ain't about generous. Thomas made you a promise. He can't keep it. Least I can do is see you get home safe." "I don't have a home to go back to." The words came out flat. Matter of fact, like she was stating that rain was wet or rocks were hard. Wyatt stopped, turning his hat. "I see. Do you?" He met her eyes. Saw something there he recognized. The look of someone who'd burned bridges and wasn't sorry about it. "Reckon I might," he said. Silence settled between them. The grandfather clock ticked in the hallway. Someone walked overhead heavy steps. Probably the drummer Herbert had mentioned was staying in room 4. "There's another option," Wyatt said. "If you want it." She waited. "My place is 2 days north of here. Small ranch, 1 cabin, some outbuildings. I work dawn to dusk most days. Garden's gone to weeds. Could use someone to tend it. Keep the place from falling apart while I'm out with the stock. You're offering me work. I'm offering you time to figure things out. You'd have a roof, 3 meals. Do what work you can manage. Stay till you know what you want to do next. In exchange for what?" The question was sharp. Wyatt didn't blame her. In exchange for cookin', mendin', keepin' the chickens fed, garden work if you're able, equal trade. And when the town talks, town'll talk regardless. About a single woman living alone with a man she's not married to. "I ain't askin' you to marry me. Miss Kessler, I'm askin' if you need a place to land." She looked down at her hands. They were small, pale, folded tight enough that her knuckles showed white. "What about Thomas?" she asked. "What about him? Does he expect me to wait until he recovers?" Wyatt thought about his cousin burning with fever in a Laramie boarding house. Thought about the letters Thomas had written, full of promises about partnership and honest work. Thought about this woman who'd traveled 2,000 miles on the strength of 3 letters and a dried flower. "Don't know if Thomas is going to recover," Wyatt said. "Even if he does, he can't ask you to wait. Wouldn't be right." Francis looked up, met his eyes. "What's your place like? 1-room cabin, rope bed in the corner, table, 2 chairs, loft space if you want privacy. Roof don't leak no more. Got a well with good water, creek 1/4 mile west. Outhouse needs repair, but it's serviceable. Chicken coops sound. Garden's about 1 acre. Mostly sage and weeds now. I'm out riding fence lines most days. You'd be alone a fair amount." "How far to town?" "Red Creek's closest. 2 days by wagon. 1.5 days if you push a horse." "Neighbors. Katie Sowers, my foreman. Bunks in the barn. Next ranch over is 6 miles east." She was quiet for a long moment. Outside. A freight wagon creaked past. Someone called out to the driver. The horse's hooves made hollow sounds on the packed dirt street. "I'll come," Francis said. "But I work for my keep. I don't take charity." She stood, extended her hand. Wyatt looked at the offered hand. Small, pale, still gloved in black cotton. He shifted his hat to his left hand, took hers with his right. Her grip was firm, stronger than he'd expected. His palm swallowed hers. Calloused and scarred from fence wire and rope burns, he could feel the bones of her fingers through the thin glove. Neither pulled away first. "We leave at first light," Wyatt said. "Bring what you can carry in a wagon. Rest'll have to stay behind. I travel light." He released her hand. Stepped back. "One more thing," he said. "Cabin's rough. Town'll gossip. You'll need thick skin for both." "I've got skin enough. Mr. Brennan." He nodded, put his hat back on, turned to leave. "Mr. Brennan." He stopped, looked back. Frances stood by the sofa, small and straight in her dusty calico dress, chin lifted just enough to show she wasn't backing down from whatever came next. "What do I call you?" "Wyatt's fine. And you'll call me Frances." Not a question, a statement. "Yes, ma'am." He left her there, walked back through the boarding house with Mrs. Finch's eyes boring into his back. Buck was waiting at the hitching post, head down, one back hoof cocked to rest. Wyatt untied the reins, stood there with leather in his hands, looking at nothing in particular. He'd just invited a stranger woman to live at his place. Town would crucify them both. And he still didn't know if Thomas would live long enough to see any of it matter. The wagon seat was hard pine worn smooth by weather and use. Frances sat on the right side, hands folded over the canvas satchel in her lap. Her trunk was wedged behind them in the bed, tied down with rope that smelled like tar and old hemp. Wyatt sat to her left, reins loose in his hands. The wagon creaked forward, leather suspension straps groaning with each rut in the road. They'd been moving for an hour, maybe more. Frances had stopped trying to count time and started watching the land instead. It was nothing like Pennsylvania. The grass here grew sparse and silver green, broken by patches of bare earth the color of rust. Scrub oak dotted the hillsides, stunted and twisted by wind. The sky went on forever, blue so deep it hurt to look at directly. No buildings, no fences, just open country that rolled away in waves of sage and stone. Wyatt pointed with his chin. "Creeks that way, 1/4 mile west, where I draw water for the cabin." Frances followed his gesture, saw a line of darker green snaking through the pale grass. Cottonwoods? Maybe. Willows. Hard to tell at this distance. "Good water?" she asked. "Best in the county. Runs year-round." The wagon wheel dropped into a hole. Frances grabbed the seat edge to keep from sliding into Wyatt. The wood was warm under her palm, heated by sun. She straightened, moved her hand back to her lap. Wyatt didn't seem to notice, or if he did, he didn't show it. The horses were a matched pair of chestnuts, both with white blazes. The one on the left had a scar across its shoulder-old wound, long-healed. Wyatt drove them gentle, didn't pop the reins or shout, just clicked his tongue when they slowed, eased back on the leather when the grade got steep. Frances watched his hands, big hands, scarred across the knuckles, nails broken short. The reins lay easy in his palms. He didn't grip tight or saw at the bits the way her cousin's husband used to do. Just held them, let the horses find their own pace. A jackrabbit exploded from the sage 10 feet ahead. The horses spooked, threw their heads. Wyatt's hands tightened but didn't jerk. He spoke low, "Easy now, easy," and the horses settled. The rabbit disappeared into the brush, white tail flashing. "Antelope up there," Wyatt said. He pointed to a rise to the north. "See 'em most mornings." Frances shaded her eyes, looked, saw nothing but grass and sky. "They're there," Wyatt said. Just good at hidin'." She nodded, let her hand drop. The sun beat down on her shoulders. She could feel sweat gathering under her collar. Between her shoulder blades, her dress stuck to her spine. The dust from the wheels rose in small clouds, settled on her skirt, turned the navy fabric gray. "How much farther?" she asked. "Hour, maybe less." They fell back into silence. The wagon creaked. The horses' hooves made soft thuds in the dirt. A bird called from somewhere high. Sharp. Then gone. Francis counted fence posts along a distant property line. Lost count at 47. The land began to change. Less flat, more rolling. Outcroppings of red stone pushed through the soil like broken teeth. Wyatt guided the wagon around them, taking paths that looked like nothing but packed earth and hope. Then she saw buildings, small, low to the ground, a cabin with a stone chimney, barn weathered silver, smaller structures chicken coop, maybe, and what looked like a root cellar built into a hillside. Fences ran in straight lines, rails nailed tight. The back step on the cabin was raw wood, newer than the rest. "That's it," Wyatt said. Francis looked at the place that would be her home, or at least her shelter. She wasn't sure which word fit yet. Wyatt pulled the horses up in front of the cabin, set the brake, wrapped the reins around the handle, climbed down, moved around to Francis's side, offered his hand. She took it, let him steady her as she stepped to the ground. Her legs had gone stiff from sitting. The blood rushed back into her feet, sharp and tingling. He released her hand the moment she was steady. "I'll show you around," he said. The cabin was one room. Francis stood in the doorway while her eyes adjusted to the dim, chinked log walls, gaps stuffed with moss and mud, plank floor swept clean, a table near the window, 2 chairs with rawhide seats. In the corner, a rope bed frame strung with hemp, corn husk mattress on top covered by a quilt. The quilt was faded blue and white in a pattern she didn't recognize. Hand-stitched, old but carefully mended. A small iron stove sat against the far wall. Pipe running up through the roof. Shelves held tin plates, cups, a few basic supplies. Everything was spare, clean, nothing extra. "You can have the bed," Wyatt said from behind her. "I'll bunk in the barn." Francis turned. "No." His eyebrows went up. "Katie can bunk with you," she said. "I'll take the loft." She pointed to the ladder in the corner, the open space above where hay was stored. "Loft ain't finished," Wyatt said. "Just boards and dust? I'll manage." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right, I'll clear it out. Put down fresh hay." He showed her the rest. Root cellar dug into the hillside, door made of angled planks over an earthen pit. She smelled potatoes, onions, the mineral scent of cool dirt. Chicken coop held 4 hens and a rooster with 1 bent tail feather. They clucked and scratched, unbothered by strangers. The vegetable patch was an acre of weeds and volunteer tomatoes struggling through the bindweed. Francis looked at it. Calculated work in hours and days. "Tools are in the barn," Wyatt said. "Hoe, spade, rake. Take what you need." Katie appeared from the barn then. Older than Wyatt, maybe 50, weathered face, gray stubble. He pulled off his hat when he saw Frances. "Ma'am," he said, eyes cautious. "Mr. Sowers. Just Katie." She nodded. He nodded back. Put his hat on. Went back to the barn. Wyatt walked her to the well. Stone-lined, bucket on a rope. He hauled up water. Poured it into a tin cup. Offered it to her. Frances drank. The water was cold. Clean. Tasted like stone and nothing else. She handed the cup back. "I ride fence most days," Wyatt said. "Gone dawn to near dark. Ring the triangle for meals." He pointed to an iron triangle hanging from the porch beam. "I'll hear it if I'm close enough. And if you're not, leave food warm. I'll eat when I get in." He showed her where to find the Dutch oven. Heavy cast iron, blackened from fire, showed her the small store of flour. Salt, lard, not much. Enough. "Beans and cornbread all right for supper?" he asked. "Fine." They went back to the cabin. Wyatt brought her trunk in, set it at the foot of the ladder. Frances climbed up to the loft. It was small, maybe 6 feet by 8 boards laid across beams, dust thick on everything. A shaft of light came through gaps in the roof. She could see sky. When she climbed back down, Wyatt was gone. She stood in the cabin alone. The silence was different from the boarding house silence. Thicker, like the air itself had weight. Frances walked to the window, not glass-oiled paper stretched across a frame. She could see through it, but the world outside was blurred. The sun was dropping toward the western hills, turning everything amber and rose. She pressed her palm to the paper. It was warm. Thin. She felt her breath fog it. Watched the condensation spread. Drew a small circle with her fingertip, then wiped it away. The quilt on the bed caught her eye again. She walked over, sat on the edge. The corn husk mattress rustled. She ran her hand across the quilt. The stitching was precise, even. Blue calico and white muslin in a star pattern. Faded but whole. Someone had taken care with this. Someone had slept under it. Loved it. Someone who wasn't here anymore. Frances smoothed the quilt carefully, folded her hands in her lap, looked around the cabin that would be her shelter for however long she stayed. The light was fading. She should start supper. Find the beans, the cornmeal, get the fire going in the stove. Instead, she sat on the rope bed and listened to the silence, and wondered whose hands had made this quilt and where they'd gone, and if Wyatt still missed them. The dew soaked through Frances's hem before she'd pulled 10 weeds. She knelt in the dirt, skirt bunched around her knees, hands already brown with soil. The garden was worse up close than it had looked from a distance. Bindweed strangled everything, runners thick as her thumb wrapping around the few plants that had survived. Lamb's quarters grew waist-high in patches. Thistle clustered near the fence posts, purple flowers already gone to seed. She started at the north corner, grabbed a fistful of bindweed, pulled. The roots held. She dug her fingers deeper, felt the main taproot, worked it loose. It came out all at once, 2 feet of white root trailing dirt. She tossed it onto the growing pile beside her. Her father had kept a small farm back in Pennsylvania before the fire. She'd learned to tell volunteer plants from weeds when she was 8 years old. Working beside him in soil that was black and rich. Not this rust-colored hardpan, but the principles were the same. Find what wants to grow. Give it room. The sun climbed. Her back started to ache. She shifted her weight, kept pulling. Under the bindweed, she found volunteer tomato plants, 6 of them, spindly and pale from lack of light, but alive. She cleared around them carefully, gave them room to breathe, found bean poles tangled in the weeds, cedar stakes someone had driven years ago, still straight, still sound. She salvaged 3, set them aside for later. Her hands were raw, dirt under every nail. The pad of her right thumb had a blister forming where she'd gripped a root too tight. She heard hoofbeats. Wyatt rode past on Buck, headed north toward the fence line. He slowed when he saw her, stopped, sat there on the gray gelding, one hand on the reins, the other resting on his thigh. Frances sat back on her heels, wiped her forehead with the back of her wrist, left a smear of mud. Wyatt didn't speak, just looked at the cleared patch, the pile of weeds, the salvaged tomato plants. Then he clicked to Buck and rode on. Frances went back to pulling weeds. The sun climbed higher. Sweat ran down her temples, pooled in the hollow of her throat. Her stomach growled. She'd eaten nothing since the cornbread at breakfast. She stood, brushed dirt from her skirt, walked back to the cabin, drank water from the bucket by the door, found a piece of cold bacon wrapped in cloth, ate it standing at the window, looking out at the half-cleared garden. The outhouse was behind the barn. She used it, washed her hands at the well, went back to work. By midday, she heard hoofbeats again. Wyatt came from the direction of the creek, bucket in his free hand. He dismounted near the garden fence, walked over, set the bucket down beside her. Water sloshed over the rim, cold, clear. She could see the bottom of the tin bucket through it. "Creek water," he said, "for the plants." He turned and walked back to Buck, swung into the saddle, rode away without waiting for thanks. Frances dipped her hands in the bucket. The cold felt like mercy. She cupped water, drank, then poured the rest around the tomato plants. The dry earth drank it down, left dark rings where the moisture spread. She worked through the afternoon. Her dress stuck to her spine. Her knees ached from kneeling. The blister on her thumb broke, wept clear fluid. She wrapped it in a strip torn from her spare petticoat and kept going. By the time the sun started its downward slide, she'd cleared a patch maybe 15 feet square. Not much. But the tomatoes had room now. The bean poles were set. The soil was turned. Ready for seed when Katie brought some from town. She walked to the creek to rinse the worst of the mud from her hands. The water was cold. Running fast over smooth stones, wildflowers grew along the bank. Indian paintbrush, red as blood. Purple asters with yellow centers. She picked a handful, careful of the stems, carried them back wrapped in her wet apron. She had no vase. The closest thing was a tin can she found under the porch. She rinsed it, filled it with water, arranged the flowers, set them on the table where the light from the window would catch them. Hammering woke her from a doze on the rope bed. She'd meant to just rest her eyes. The light had changed lower, more golden. She must have slept an hour. The hammering came from above. Roof. Frances climbed down from the bed, stepped outside, shaded her eyes, looked up. Wyatt was on the cabin roof, hammer in one hand, cedar shingle in the other. A pile of shingles sat beside him. He worked methodical pulled old shingles, tossed them to the ground, nailed new ones in place. His shirt was dark with sweat across the shoulders. Frances went to the well, drew water, poured it into the tin cup, climbed the ladder leaning against the side of the cabin. Her legs protested. The blister on her thumb screamed when she gripped the rungs, but she made it to the roofline, held out the cup. Wyatt looked at her, then at the cup, set down his hammer, took the water, drank it in 4 swallows, handed it back. "Checked the roof after the last rain," he said. "Dripped right over the bed." Frances waited. There hadn't been rain since she'd arrived. She'd have noticed. "Figure it needs fixin' before the next one comes." Wyatt continued. He picked up another shingle, lined it up, drove the nail home with 3 strikes. She understood then. He'd climbed up here to check, found the leak, fixed it, even though nobody was sleeping under it yet when he'd found it. "How many more?" she asked. "Maybe a dozen. Be done before dark." She climbed back down, washed the cup, filled it again, left it on the porch rail where he could reach it when he came down. Inside the cabin, she heated beans for supper, cut cornbread from what she'd made that morning, found his shirt, the one he'd been wearing yesterday, torn along the shoulder seam where it had caught on something. Fence wire. Probably. Or a nail. She lit the lamp, got out her sewing kit. Her mother had taught her to mend when she was 6 years old. Before the fever took her, the stitches had to be small, even invisible if done right. She threaded the bone needle, knotted the end, started working the edges together. The tear was clean. Easy to mend if she took her time. Small stitches, even, the way her mother had shown her. Her eyes were tired. The blister on her thumb made it hard to grip the needle. She finished anyway, knotted off the thread, bit it clean, folded the shirt, left it on Wyatt's chair. Wyatt came in while she was serving beans onto tin plates. He saw the flowers on the table. Stopped. His eyes went to them. Stayed there a moment longer than they should have. She caught something in his face. Surprise, maybe. Or something softer. Then it was gone. "Need anything from town?" he asked. "Katie's riding in tomorrow." "Seeds," Frances said. "If the store has them. Squash, carrots, maybe lettuce." "I'll tell him." Wyatt sat at the table. Frances served beans, cornbread. They ate without talking. The only sound was forks on tin and the creak of chairs when they shifted weight. After, while Wyatt was out checking the horses, Frances found the shirt on his chair. He'd moved it, unfolded it, looked at the mend. She could tell by the way it was refolded careful, deliberate that he'd noticed. She was in the loft when she heard him come back in, heard the pause, the scrape of the chair, then quiet. She lay in the hay tick she'd made, straw prickling through the blanket Katie had given her. The loft was dark, hot, air thick with dust, and the smell of old wood. Through the gaps in the boards she could see lamplight from below, could hear Wyatt moving around. The scrape of a chair. Water poured from the pitcher into the basin. Then quiet. Voices woke her. Low, outside. She crawled to the edge of the loft, looked down through the gap. The cabin was dark, empty. The voices came from the porch, Wyatt and Katie. "She's a worker, that one," Katie said. "Got spine?" Wyatt's voice. Quieter. "Reckon so. Garden's looking better already. And she fixed your shirt." Silence. "You gonna tell her?" Katie asked. "Tell her what? About Sarah? About the baby?" More silence. Longer this time. "Ain't her business," Wyatt said finally. "It is if she's gonna be livin' here. She's just stayin' till she figures things out. Few weeks, Maybe. Then she'll move on. You sure about that? Frances held her breath, waited for Wyatt's answer, but he didn't give one. The gray silk dress didn't fit the way it used to. Frances stood in the cabin, trying to work the buttons at her back. Her shoulders had broadened in 3 weeks of garden work. The fabric pulled tight across her shoulder blades. She got the buttons fastened anyway, sucked in her breath, held it. Wyatt was outside hitching the wagon. She could hear the clink of trace chains, the horses blowing through their noses. Sunday, church, his idea. Town'll talk less if they see us together, he'd said at breakfast. Show 'em you're staying proper. Frances didn't care what the town thought, but she'd agreed, partly because Wyatt asked, partly because she needed to see how bad the talk had gotten. She pulled on her black gloves. The right one had a hole near the thumb from garden work. She tucked it so the hole didn't show. Her hair was pinned tight under the small hat. She'd washed it yesterday in creek water, scrubbed until her scalp hurt. It still smelled faintly of lye soap. The gray silk smelled like cedar from the trunk, like Pennsylvania, like a life she'd left behind. She stepped outside. Wyatt stood by the wagon in his black suit. It was tight across the shoulders, loose at the waist. His white shirt had a celluloid collar that looked like it was choking him. String tie, knotted crooked. He'd shaved. Cut himself under the jaw, small nick. Dried blood dark against the pale skin. He looked at her. She looked at him. Neither spoke. He climbed into the wagon, gathered the reins, offered his free hand to help her up. His palm was warm through her glove, calloused. She stepped onto the wheel hub, let him steady her onto the seat, released his hand when she was settled. The ride to Red Creek took 2 hours. The silence stretched between them like fence wire. Frances watched the land roll past. Wyatt kept his eyes on the road. The church sat at the edge of town, white clapboard, bell tower pointing at the sky. Like an accusing finger, wagons and horses crowded the yard. Families in their Sunday clothes, women in calico and muslin, men in dark suits that didn't fit quite right. Children scrubbed pink and squirming. Wyatt pulled the wagon into a space near the back, set the brake, wrapped the reins, climbed down. Frances waited, let him come around, offer his hand again. She stepped down, smoothed her skirt. The silk was wrinkled from sitting. Too fine for this place. She should have worn the calico, eyes turned toward them. Mrs. Adelaide Finch from the boarding house stood near the church steps, talking to 2 other women. Her mouth made a small O when she saw Frances. She leaned toward the women, whispered something. All 3 looked. The doctor's wife, Frances, didn't know her name, stared openly, nudged the woman beside her. A young widow in black, Clara Hayes. Frances had heard Katie mention her, stood with a woman who had to be her sister. Same narrow face, same pale eyes. Clara said something behind her gloved hand. The sister smiled. Frances kept her spine straight. Didn't look away. Wyatt's hand touched the small of her back. Just a moment, just enough pressure to say, "Keep moving." They walked toward the church. The crowd parted. Not obviously, just enough space to let them through while making it clear they were separate. Other. Not quite welcome. Reverend Patterson stood at the door, older man, white hair, kind face creased with lines that said he smiled more than he frowned. He extended his hand to Wyatt. "Mr. Brennan, good to see you." "Reverend?" They shook. Patterson turned to Francis. "And this must be Miss Kessler. Welcome." His eyes were genuinely warm. Francis felt something in her chest loosen, just slightly. "Thank you, Reverend. How are you finding Wyoming Territory? Different from Pennsylvania?" He smiled. "I imagined so." "Well, we're glad to have you. Any friend of the Brennans is welcome here." The words were pointed, deliberate. A statement for the women whispering nearby. They filed inside. The church was small. Wooden pews, whitewashed walls, windows of real glass that let in morning light. It smelled like beeswax and old hymnals and the lavender water someone had sprinkled on the floor. Wyatt led them to a pew near the back. Francis sat, smoothed her skirt, folded her hands in her lap. Wyatt sat beside her. Not touching. 6 inches between them. Proper distance. The pews filled. Francis felt eyes on her back, heard the rustle of skirts, the whisper of voices that stopped when she turned her head. Reverend Patterson took the pulpit, opened his Bible. The congregation stood for the opening hymn. "Rock of ages, cleft for me, let me hide myself in thee." Francis sang. Quiet. The words were familiar. She'd sung them 100 times in the church back home. But here they sounded different. Harder. Like the rock the hymn spoke of. The sermon was about Ruth and Naomi. About loyalty. About a foreign woman who chose to stay with her mother-in-law in a strange land. About how the Lord blessed that choice. Reverend Patterson's eyes found Francis twice during the sermon. Not obvious, just a glance, a nod, as if to say, "This is for you." Clara Hayes sat 3 rows ahead, black-clad, shoulders stiff. She turned once, looked back at Francis. Her face was pale, tight, mouth pressed into a line like a scar. The service ended. The congregation filed out. Francis and Wyatt waited until the pew was clear, then stood. Outside. People clustered in small groups. Wyatt was stopped by Mr. Garrett from the general store older man. Balding, apron still on under his Sunday coat. "Need to settle your account. Brennan," Garrett said. "Been running a tab since spring." "I'll be in Tuesday," Wyatt said. Garrett nodded. Looked at Francis. "This the young lady Thomas was expecting?" "Yes, sir." "Heard he took sick. That true?" "Yes, sir." Garrett studied Francis with eyes that calculated worth like he was weighing flour. "You staying at Brennan's place, I hear." "Yes, sir. Helping out." "Are you—" Francis felt heat climb her neck. "I work for my keep. I'm sure you do." The words were neutral, but the tone wasn't. Wyatt's jaw tightened. "Miss Kessler's gonna need her own line of credit. She'll be ordering supplies separate from mine." Garrett's eyebrows went up. "That so?" "Yes, sir." A long pause. Then Garrett nodded. "Come see me Tuesday. We'll set it up." He tipped his hat to Francis. Walked away. Mrs. Finch approached. She had the doctor's wife with her, a thin woman with graying hair and sharp eyes. "Miss Kessler," Mrs. Finch said. "This is Mrs. Elizabeth Garrett, the store owner's wife." "Ma'am," Francis said. Mrs. Garrett looked her up and down, took in the gray silk, the black gloves, the hat that was 3 years out of fashion. "You're from Pennsylvania, I understand." "Yes, ma'am." "What brought you all the way out here?" The question was a trap. Francis could hear it in the woman's voice. "Opportunity," Francis said. "Opportunity." Mrs. Garrett's mouth thinned. "Is that what they're calling it now?" The words hung in the air like smoke. Wyatt stepped closer, not touching Francis, just closer. "Miss Kessler's been kind enough to help out while Thomas recovers," he said, voice level, dangerous underneath. "Garden's producin' again, cabin's in order. I'm obliged for the help." "I'm sure you are," Mrs. Garrett said. Mrs. Finch looked uncomfortable. "Well, we should let you both—" Clara Hayes appeared, her sister beside her, both in black, both pale as milk. "Mr. Brennan," Clara said, sweet voice, acid underneath. "How convenient this all worked out. Your cousin too sick to travel. You right there to step in. Wasn't convenient. Mrs. Hayes," Wyatt said. "Was necessary." "Was it?" Clara tilted her head. "Seems to me there were other options. She could have gone back east. Could have stayed at the boarding house. But instead she's living alone with you. Unmarried. Unchaperoned, except for your hired man." "Katie's there," Wyatt said. "In the barn," Clara said. "Convenient." Francis's hands clenched in her gloves, the hole near her thumb pulled wider. "Mrs. Hayes," she said, voice quiet. "I appreciate your concern, but I assure you, I'm not concerned for you, Miss Kessler." Clara's smile was sharp. "I'm concerned for this community. We have standards, morals. We don't take kindly to women who— Mrs. Hayes—" Wyatt's voice cut through like an axe. "Your husband's fence is down on the north side. Cattle been getting through to Henderson's land. I'll be out Thursday to fix it." Clara's face went red. "You don't need to." "I know I don't need to. I'm gonna do it anyway." The message was clear. "I'll still help you, even though you're cruel. I'll be the better person even if you won't." Clara's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Come on, Margaret," she said to her sister. They turned, walked away, skirts swishing. Mrs. Garrett and Mrs. Finch exchanged glances. "Well," Mrs. Finch said, "we should be going. Good to see you. Mr. Brennan, Miss Kessler." They left. Francis stood beside the wagon. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her skirt. Wyatt unhitched the horses, checked the traces, moved slow, deliberate, like he was giving her time to gather herself. When he came around to help her up, she saw his jaw was still tight, the muscle jumping. "I can leave," Francis said, "if this harms you." Wyatt looked at her, really looked. His eyes were brown. She hadn't noticed that before. Dark brown, almost black in this light. "They already hurt you," he said. "I ain't gonna pile on." She held his gaze, wanted to say something. "Thank you, I'm sorry, something," but the words wouldn't come. She took his offered hand, climbed into the wagon. The ride home was quieter than the ride there. Francis stared at her hands in her lap. The hole in her right glove had torn wider. She could see skin through it, brown from sun, calloused from work. Not the hands of a lady anymore. The hands of someone who belonged here. Maybe. They were a mile from the ranch when Wyatt spoke. "You did good back there." Francis looked at him. "Held your head up. Didn't apologize for something that ain't wrong." "It was wrong to them." "Then they're wrong." Simple as that. No argument. No justification. They pulled into the yard. Wyatt set the brake, climbed down, came around to help her, this time when she took his hand. She didn't let go right away. "Thank you," she said. His hand tightened on hers, just slightly, just enough. "You're welcome." He released her hand, turned to unhitch the horses. Francis went into the cabin. Changed out of the gray silk, hung it carefully. Put on her work dress, the blue gingham. Faded now. Hem permanently stained with garden dirt. This was who she was now. She went to the garden. Picked up the hoe. Started working. The sun was dropping when she heard hoofbeats. Not Wyatt coming back from the barn, someone else. She straightened. Shaded her eyes. A rider appeared over the eastern rise, moving fast, coming straight toward the ranch. Frances set down the hoe, walked toward the cabin. The rider got closer. She could see him now. Young, maybe 20, riding hard. He pulled up in the yard, horse lathered, breathing hard. Miss Kessler. Yes. The rider pulled an envelope from his saddlebag, extended it. Telegram from Laramie. For you. Frances's heart stopped. She knew what it said before she opened it. Thomas. The telegram paper was cheap. Yellow. Thin enough to see her fingers through it when Frances held it to the light. She stood in the yard where the rider had handed it to her. The envelope was already torn. Someone at the telegraph office had opened it, read it, sealed it back with wax that cracked when she pulled the flap. Miss Kessler. Stop. Thomas condition. Critical. Stop. Doctors. Uncertain. Stop. Will advise. Stop. T. Brennan landlady. No money this time. Just bad news getting worse. Frances's hands didn't shake. That surprised her. She thought they would. Wyatt appeared from the barn, saw her standing there with the telegram. Stopped. News, he asked. She handed him the paper. He read it. Folded it. Handed it back. Storm comin', he said. The words seemed wrong. Out of place. Then Frances turned. The horizon had gone dark. Not blue dark or gray dark. Green-black. The color of old bruises. Clouds boiled up from behind the hills, moving fast, eating the light. Get inside, Wyatt said. Started toward the corral where the horses were already spooked. Tossing their heads. Frances went to the cabin. Stood in the doorway. Watched Wyatt and Katie work to get the stock secured. The chickens scattered. Squawking. The wind picked up. Tore at Frances's skirt. Whipped her hair loose from its pins. Lightning split the sky. No thunder yet. Just that white crack across the green-black clouds. Wyatt got the horses into the barn. Came running toward the cabin. Inside, now, Frances stepped back. He followed her in, slammed the door. The wind screamed like something dying. Rain hit the roof like thrown gravel. The cabin went dark. Frances fumbled for the lamp. Wyatt got there first, struck a match. The flame jumped, steadied. He touched it to the wick. Yellow light pushed back the shadows, but not far. The roof groaned. Wind found the gaps in the chinking, shrieked through. The oiled paper window bulged inward, held, bulged again. Sit, Wyatt said. Pointed to the table. Frances sat. The telegram was still in her hand. Crumpled now. She'd forgotten she was holding it. Drip. Water hit the table between them. She looked up. Dark spot spreading on the ceiling boards. Drip, drip. Wyatt grabbed the tin basin from beside the stove. Set it under the leak. Moved the lamp. Got the coffee pot. Another leak near the window. He set the pot under it. Drip, 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 drip. The sound multiplied. Frances counted 6 leaks, then 7. Wyatt ran out of containers, started using cups, bowls, anything that would hold water. Thunder came. Close. The cabin shook. Frances's hands jerked. She grabbed the table edge. Lightning again. Through the window. Everything white. Frozen. Then black. In the white flash, she'd seen the barn, door swinging open, Katie fighting to close it against the wind. "Katie," she started. "He's fine," Wyatt said. "Built that barn to last. More thunder, right on top of them." Frances's ears rang. The water in the basin jumped. She was 10 years old again, in the barn with her father. Smell of hay and horses and the first drops of rain on dry wood. Her father saying, "Stay here. I'll get the cows." Then the lightning, the hay catching, fire spreading faster than her child legs could run. Smoke thick enough to choke. Her father pulling her out, hair singed, lungs screaming. His hands blistered, skin peeling. The smell of burned flesh that never left her memory. The barn had burned to ash. They'd lost everything. Lightning cracked, thunder simultaneous. The cabin jumped. Frances's hands locked on the table edge. Her breath came short. She tried to slow it. Couldn't. Wyatt's hand touched her shoulder. Warm, solid. "Cabin's sound," he said. "We'll weather it." She couldn't speak, just nodded. His hand stayed. She didn't pull away. They sat like that, rain hammering, thunder rolling, the leaks making their small music into the pots and pans. Frances's breathing slowed. Her hands loosened on the table. Wyatt's hand slipped from her shoulder, but he didn't move away. Stayed close. Close enough she could smell horse and rain and something else. Cedar. Maybe. From the shingles he'd replaced. "You're scared of storms," he said. Not a question. "Yes." "Why?" She told him. The barn. The fire. Her father's burned hands that never healed right. How he couldn't work after. How they lost the farm. How he died 3 years later from infection that started in those old burn scars. Wyatt listened. Didn't interrupt, just listened. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. The rain eased slightly, not much, just enough that the thunder sounded farther away. "I'm scared of losing things I try to protect," Wyatt said finally. Frances looked at him. His face was half shadow in the lamplight. "Sarah," he said, "my wife. She died 7 years back. Childbirth. Baby didn't make it either." The words came slow, like he was pulling them from somewhere deep. "Built her this cabin. Fixed it nice. Tried to make it a home. Wasn't enough." He looked at the quilt on the bed. "She made that? Took her a whole winter. Said she wanted something beautiful in this ugly place." "It's not ugly," Frances said. "She thought it was. Came from St. Louis. Used to find things. This." He gestured at the one-room cabin. The leaking roof. This wasn't what she wanted, but she stayed. She stayed. Got pregnant first winter. Was happy about it. Said a baby would make it feel like home. His jaw worked. Labor went 36 hours. Midwife said the baby was turned wrong. By the time I got the doctor from town, it was too late. Lost them both. Frances's throat tightened. "I'm sorry. Wasn't your fault. Still sorry." They sat in silence. The rain drummed, thunder rumbled. Distant now, moving east. "You built fine," Frances said. "She was loved, that's all there is." Wyatt looked at her. Something shifted in his face. Softened. The door crashed open. Wind drove rain inside. Wyatt jumped up, fought the door closed. It had torn loose from the latch. He threw his weight against it. Frances grabbed the chair. wedged it under the handle, but the damage was done. Water covered the floor, pooled around the table legs. Wyatt turned. His shirt was drenched, hair plastered to his forehead. Water dripped from his nose. "We need to." The window gave. Oiled paper tore. Wind and rain poured through. The lamp flame jumped, died. Darkness. Frances heard Wyatt move, heard him swear, heard something crash. Lightning lit the room. She saw him trying to stuff a blanket into the window frame. Saw water streaming down the walls. Thunder. Dark again. She felt her way to him. Her hands found his back, moved to his shoulder. "Let me help." Together they worked the blanket into the gap. It held, barely. The cabin went quiet, except for the dripping and the rain on the roof. They stood in the dark, breathing hard, both soaked. Frances's dress stuck to her skin. Her hair hung in ropes down her back. "You still got matches?" she asked. "Left pocket? Coat by the door." She felt her way there, found the coat, found the matches, struck one. The flame showed the cabin transformed. Water everywhere. Pots overflowing. She lit the lamp, adjusted the wick. Wyatt stood by the window, pressing the blanket in place. His shirt was see-through with water. She could see the line of his shoulders, the curve of his spine. A scar on his right shoulder blade. Old burn mark. Puckered and white. He turned, saw her looking, looked away. "Need to check the stock," he said. He opened the door, stepped out into the rain. Frances followed. The yard was a lake. Brown water, ankle deep, rushing toward the creek. The garden was under water. Frances could see her tomato plants bent, broken. Wyatt waded toward the chicken coop. The door hung open. Water inside to the roosts. Frances stepped off the porch. Her feet hit mud. Cold. Thick. It sucked at her ankles. She'd kicked off her shoes inside. They were soaked through anyway. She pushed forward. Each step was a fight. The mud pulled at her, tried to keep her. Wyatt reached the coop, waded in, came out with 2 dead hens, laid them on higher ground. The live birds were on the highest beam, making sounds that weren't quite clucks, fear sounds. "We need to move 'em to the barn," Wyatt said. Frances nodded, reached for a hen. It squawked, flapped, scratched her arm. 3 lines of blood welled up. She grabbed again. Got it, held it against her chest. They worked in the rain, 6 trips, 6 hens and the rooster. By the time they finished, Frances's feet were black with mud. Her arms were scratched. Her dress was ruined, torn at the hem where she'd caught it on the coop door. Soaked through. Stained brown. She stood in the yard, looked down at herself, covered in mud, bleeding, looking like something dragged through a ditch. This was who she was now. Not the schoolteacher from Pennsylvania, not the mail-order bride in her good dress, just a woman standing in mud in the rain, holding a wet chicken, bleeding from scratches, looking like trash. The shame of it hit her like a fist. What would they say in Pennsylvania if they could see her now? What would the banker's son think? Then she looked at Wyatt. Covered in mud, too. Soaked. Bleeding from a cut on his hand where the coop door had caught him. He met her eyes, and she didn't feel ashamed anymore. "Garden's flooded," Katie called from the barn door. Frances turned. Looked. Everything she'd worked for 3 weeks was underwater. The tomatoes, the cleared ground, the bean poles, all of it gone under brown, rushing water. She walked to the garden fence, stood there in the mud, bare feet sinking, looking at the ruin. Wyatt came up beside her. "We'll fix it," Francis said. "Not you. We—" His eyes cut to her. "Yeah," he said. "We will." They stood there in the rain and the mud while the water rose, and somewhere thunder rolled away toward the mountains. When Francis finally turned to go back inside, she saw it. A rider, coming fast from the south. Even in the rain, she could see the horse was pushed hard, lathered. The rider pulled up at the fence. Young man, same one who'd delivered the first telegram. "Mr. Brennan," he shouted over the rain. "Got another wire." Wyatt took the envelope, tore it open. Read by lightning flash. His face went still as stone. He handed Francis the paper. "Thomas Brennan, deceased. Stop. Pneumonia. Stop. Funeral. Friday. Laramie. Stop. Come, if able. Stop. Dr. James Warren." The words blurred. Francis read them again. Again. Thomas was dead. They buried Thomas Brennan in the Laramie Cemetery on a Friday morning, under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Francis stood beside the grave with Wyatt on one side and Katie on the other. There were maybe 20 people there, Thomas's landlady, the doctor who'd tried to save him, a few men from the Cattle Association who'd done business with the Brennan family over the years. Most of them looked at Francis like she was something that didn't belong. The Reverend spoke words about dust and ashes and eternal rest. Francis heard maybe half of them. The rest got lost in the wind that came down from the mountains, carrying the smell of pine and distance. She hadn't loved Thomas Brennan. She'd never even met him. But she'd traveled 2,000 miles on his promise. And now he was in a pine box going into Wyoming ground. And she felt something. Not grief, exactly. Guilt, maybe. That she was standing here alive, and he was dead. And she'd been thinking more about Wyatt than about the man she was supposed to marry. The Reverend finished. People started drifting away. The landlady, a thick woman with kind eyes, came over, pressed Francis's hand. "He talked about you," she said, "near the end, when the fever would break for a bit. Said he was sorry he couldn't be the man you needed. Said he hoped you'd find what you were looking for out here." Francis's throat tightened. "Thank you for telling me." The woman nodded, walked away. Wyatt touched Francis's elbow. "We should go. Long ride back." They'd left before dawn, pushed hard to make the funeral. The horses were tired. So was Francis. She'd slept maybe 2 hours the night before, lying in the loft, listening to Wyatt move around below. Both of them pretending they weren't thinking about what Thomas's death meant. The ride back to Red Creek took most of the day. They stopped once to water the horses, ate jerky and hardtack without talking. Wyatt kept his eyes on the road. Francis watched the mountains slide past. They were an hour from the ranch when Wyatt finally spoke. "You gonna leave?" Francis had been expecting the question. "Where would I go? Back east, town, somewhere that ain't here." She looked at him. His jaw was tight, eyes fixed straight ahead like he was afraid to see her answer. "Is that what you want? Ain't about what I want. Then what's it about?" He was quiet for a long moment. The wagon wheels creaked. The horses' hooves made soft sounds in the dirt. "It's about doing right by you," Wyatt said finally. "You came here for Thomas. Thomas is gone. You got no obligation to stay." "I never had an obligation," Francis said. "I had a choice, still do." "And She looked at the land rolling past, the sage, the red stone, the mountains in the distance, looked at the calluses on her hands, the dirt under her nails that never quite came clean anymore. "I came west to escape," she said. "Pennsylvania expected me to marry the banker's son, teach Sunday school, fade into respectability, be grateful for scraps." She turned to face Wyatt. "I wanted earth under my nails and sky overhead, wanted something real." "This place is real," Wyatt said. "Sometimes too real." "That's why I'm staying." His hands tightened on the reins. "That the only reason—" Her breath caught. "No." "What's the other reason?" She met his eyes. "You," the word hung between them. Too big, too honest, too late to take back. "Francis, I know what you're gonna say. I'm not asking for anything. I'm just telling you true. I stay because this place feels like somewhere I could belong. And because you—" She stopped. Started again. "Because you treat me like a person. Not charity. Not a problem to solve. Not something to pity. Just a person." Wyatt pulled the wagon to a stop, right there in the middle of the road, set the brake, turned to face her. "I fixed that roof for you," he said. "Not because it needed fixin', because I wanted you to be dry. I know. I rode 2 days to Red Creek because I didn't want you sitting alone on a platform with folks judging you. I know. I stood in church and let Clara Hayes say her piece because killing her with kindness was the only way to shut her up without making it worse for you. I know. You know?" He said it flat. "You know, and you're still sitting here. Where else would I be? Anywhere but this played-out ranch with a man who's got nothing but mud and hard work to offer." Frances reached into her pocket, pulled out the letter Thomas's landlady had pressed into her hand after the funeral. She hadn't opened it until they were on the road. Inside had been $47 in bills and a note in shaky handwriting. "For your passage, east. I'm sorry I couldn't be the man you needed. She held the money out to Wyatt. "Send it back to his landlady. Tell her to use it for his debts or give it to the church. I don't need it." Wyatt stared at the bills. "That's your ticket out. I don't want a ticket out. What do you want?" She folded the money, pressed it into his hand. "I want to stay. I want to keep working the garden. I want to sit on that porch in the evening and watch the sun go down. I want—" She stopped. Her throat was tight. "I want to build something that's mine, ours. If you'll have me." Wyatt's hand closed around the money, around her hand holding it. "What are we doing, Francis?" "Building something true. If you want me to stay. If I want—" He stopped, looked at her like she'd said something crazy. "I've been wanting you to stay since that first day. Since you shook my hand like we were signing a contract and looked me in the eye like you weren't scared of nothing. I was scared. Didn't show it. I was terrified. Still am. Of what? Of this? Of staying? Of leaving? Of wanting something and having it taken away." Wyatt's free hand lifted, touched her cheek. Gentle. His palm was rough, calloused, warm. "I can't promise nothing stays forever," he said. "Sarah taught me that. But I can promise if you stay. I'll work every day to make it worth staying." Frances turned her face into his palm, felt the calluses, the scars, the strength. "I'm not your housekeeper," she said. "No. And I'm not charity. No. So what am I?" His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "My partner, if you'll have it. In the ranch. In everything." She put her hand over his where it rested against her face. "Yes. We gotta do this proper," he said. "Town's already talking. We get married, it quiets down, and—" He stopped, swallowed. "And I don't want you sleeping in that loft come winter. Don't want you working yourself sick. Don't want to wake up worrying if you got enough firewood or if you're warm enough, or if you're gonna decide this ain't enough and leave." Francis's eyes stung. "This is enough. More than enough." "Then marry me. Not because Thomas died, and I feel obligated, not because the town expects it, because I choose you, and I'm hoping you choose me back." "I already said yes. Say it again." "Yes, Wyatt, I'll marry you." He pulled her close. She went, rested her forehead against his chest, felt his arms come around her. Solid, real, home. They sat like that in the stopped wagon while a hawk circled overhead, and the horses stamped, and somewhere in the distance a coyote called. When they finally pulled apart, Wyatt picked up the reins, released the brake. The wagon started moving again. "We'll talk to Reverend Patterson on Sunday," he said. "Get married proper. Then nobody can say nothing. They'll say plenty. Let 'em." Francis looked at the money still in her hand. Thomas's last gift. His last apology. "What should I do with this?" she asked. "Keep it for seed, for tools, for whatever you need. It was meant for passage east. You ain't going east." She folded the bills, tucked them into her pocket. Thomas had wanted her to find what she was looking for out here. Maybe, in a way, she had. They came over the last rise. The ranch spread below them, the cabin with its new roof, the barn, the garden still flooded but draining now, muddy but not ruined. The fences Wyatt had rebuilt, the chicken coop, it wasn't much, a one-room cabin and an acre of weeds and a man who smelled like horse and didn't talk much. But it was hers. Theirs. Francis looked at Wyatt. When what? When do we get married?" He thought about it. "Saturday, if Reverend Patterson can do it. Give us a week to get things ready." "A week?" She tested the word. It felt too short and too long at the same time. They pulled into the yard. Wyatt set the brake. Climbed down, cames around to help her. When he lifted her down, he didn't let go right away, just stood there, hands on her waist, looking at her like he was memorizing her face. "You sure?" he asked. "I'm sure." He nodded, released her, turned to unhitch the horses. Francis went into the cabin. It smelled like damp wood and lamp oil, and the faint scent of the wildflowers she'd picked that had long since wilted. She lit the lamp, started heating water for coffee. Through the window, she could see Wyatt leading the horses to the barn. Katie came out, helped him with the harnesses. They stood talking probably about the funeral, about Thomas, about what came next. Francis poured coffee when it was ready, went outside, handed a cup to Wyatt. "Thank you," he said. They stood on the porch drinking coffee as the sun dropped toward the mountains. Neither spoke. Didn't need to. Katie cleared his throat. "Reckon I'll start on that bedroom addition tomorrow. Wedding gift. Can't have you two." He stopped. "You'll need proper space." Wyatt nodded. "Appreciate it." Katie went back to the barn. Francis and Wyatt stayed on the porch. The stars came out, one by one, then in clusters, then so many the sky was more light than dark. "Think we'll make it?" Francis asked. Quiet, almost to herself. Wyatt's hand found hers in the dark. Squeezed. "We already have," he said. Saturday morning came clear and bright, but when Francis woke in the loft, she heard voices outside. Urgent. She climbed down the ladder. Wyatt was at the door, talking to a rider. Not Katie, someone else. The rider turned. Francis recognized him. The young man who'd delivered both telegrams. He was holding another envelope. The telegram wasn't bad news. Francis read it twice to be sure. Thomas's landlady writing to say his few belongings had been sold. Debts settled. Remainder sent to Wyatt as next of kin. $17. It would arrive by post within the month. Wyatt folded the paper, tucked it in his pocket. The rider left. The dust from his horse's hooves hung in the morning air, then settled. "That's done then," Wyatt said. Francis nodded. Thomas was truly gone now. No more telegrams, no more obligations, just the two of them and the work ahead. They were married that afternoon in the ranch yard under a sky so clear it looked scrubbed. Reverend Patterson came with his wife. Katie stood witness. Mrs. Patterson had brought a jar of preserves and a loaf of bread wrapped in cloth, still warm from her oven. Frances wore the cream muslin dress she'd sewn in secret over 6 evenings, stitching by lamplight after Wyatt had gone to the barn. Simple, high collar, long sleeves, hem that brushed the ground. She'd embroidered wildflowers along the cuff's Indian paintbrush, asters, the flowers that grew by the creek fence. Wyatt wore his black suit, hair combed, boots polished. When he looked at her, something in his face went soft. The ceremony was brief. Reverend Patterson spoke about Ruth and Boaz, about strangers becoming family, about choosing each other daily. Frances heard maybe half of it. The rest got lost in the sound of her own heartbeat and the way Wyatt's hand held hers steady, warm, real. "Do you, Wyatt Brennan, take this woman?" "I do." "Do you, Francis Kessler, take this man?" "I do." "Then by the authority vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." Wyatt's hands cupped her face. He kissed her. Brief, gentle, but enough. Mrs. Patterson cried. Katie grinned. Reverend Patterson shook Wyatt's hand, kissed Francis's cheek. They ate bread and preserves standing in the yard. Talked about nothing important: weather, cattle prices, when the first snow might come, normal things, easy things. When the Pattersons left, Katie disappeared into the barn with a knowing look. Francis and Wyatt stood alone in the garden. The sun was dropping. The light turned everything gold. 10 weeks had passed since they'd buried Thomas. 10 weeks of work. The garden had come back stronger than before. Katie had brought transplants from a ranch east of Red Creek tomato seedlings already 6 inches tall. Bean starts, squash plants in wooden flats. Francis had set them in the cleared ground, watered them daily from the creek bucket, pulled weeds as they appeared. Now the garden was full. Squash vines sprawling, heavy with yellow crookneck and green zucchini, tomatoes red and ripe on staked vines, beans hanging thick on the salvaged cedar poles, carrots in straight rows, their feathery tops bright green, onions drying on racks Wyatt had built. Francis knelt between rows, cutting squash with the knife Wyatt had sharpened that morning. The blade was old, bone handle worn smooth, but it held an edge. Each squash came off clean. She set them in the willow basket beside her knee. The basket was nearly full. She'd need another trip to carry it all. Wyatt worked the bean poles 20 feet away. He moved steady, pulling pods, dropping them into his basket. His shirt was rolled to the elbows. Sweat darkened the fabric between his shoulder blades. Katie came around the cabin carrying the last bushel of carrots. Dirt still clung to the roots. He set the basket on the porch, wiped his forehead. "That's it," he said. "Near 50 pounds, I figure. Good crop. Wyatt said. Better than good. Katie looked at Francis, tipped his hat. Ain't seen a garden produce like this in years. Mrs. Brennan. The name still sounded strange. Mrs. Brennan. Frances Brennan. Not Kessler anymore. She stood, brushed dirt from her skirt. The blue gingham was faded nearly white now. Hem shortened where she'd cut away the mud-stained bottom. Work clothes. Real clothes. She carried her basket to the porch, set it beside the carrots, looked at what they'd harvested. Squash, beans, carrots, tomatoes in crates, onions drying, enough to see them through winter, enough to trade in town, enough. The sun touched the mountains, light slanted across the yard, caught the garden rose, turned everything amber and rose. Wyatt came to the porch, set down his basket, stood beside her. Built you something, he said. He led her around the side of the cabin. There, under the cottonwood, sat a rocking chair. Pine. Simple. Cane seat. The wood was fresh cut, pale gold in the fading light. Frances ran her hand over the armrest. The wood was smooth, sanded careful. No splinters. The joints were tight, pegged and fitted. Made it in the barn, Wyatt said. Evenings after you went up to the loft. Wanted you to have something that was yours. She sat. The chair rocked easy, balanced perfect. She looked out at the garden, the barn, the mountains beyond. It's beautiful, she said. Wyatt sat on the porch step below her, pulled out his whittling knife, started working a piece of cottonwood. His hands moved steady, shaving thin curls that fell to the ground. What are you making? She asked. Bird, for you. She smiled, rocked slow, watched him work. Katie came from the barn, saw them sitting there. You two finally figured it out, then. Reckon so, Wyatt said. About time. Katie climbed the steps. I'm building you that bedroom addition. Should have done it weeks ago. Can't have you in the loft all winter. Need proper space. You don't have to. Francis started. I know I don't. I'm doing it anyway. He went inside, came back with the coffee pot, poured 3 cups, handed them around. They sat on the porch drinking coffee as the stars came out. The conversation drifted cattle prices, fence repairs, whether the first snow would come early this year, normal things, family things. When Katie finally went to the barn for the night, Wyatt set down his cup. The bird he'd been carving was taking shape small, wings half spread, beak open like it was singing. Think we'll make it? Francis asked. Wyatt's hand found hers in the growing dark. We already have. She looked at him. Have we? You're here. I'm here. Garden's full. Roof don't leak. We got each other. He squeezed her hand. That's making it. They sat in silence. A coyote called from somewhere west. Another answered. Francis thought about Pennsylvania, the cousin's house, the banker's son, the Sunday dinners that tasted like ash, that life felt like something that had happened to someone else. This was her life now. Dirt under her nails, calluses on her palms, a husband who showed love by building chairs and fixing roofs, a garden that grew because she'd cleared the weeds and given it room. I'm glad I stayed, she said. Wyatt looked at her. The lamplight from inside the cabin caught his face, showed the lines around his eyes, the gray starting at his temples. I'm glad you came, he said. They went inside as the temperature dropped. Wyatt banked the fire in the stove. Frances climbed the ladder to the loft one last time. Tomorrow, Katie would start framing the bedroom addition, and she'd sleep in a proper bed again. But tonight, in the loft, she lay in the straw tick and looked through the gaps in the boards at the lamplight below. Heard Wyatt moving around, the cabin settling, the wind in the cottonwood. She'd come west, running from something, found something worth running to instead. Morning came cold and clear. Frances woke to hammering. Katie already working on the frame for the new room. Wyatt was up, coffee made, bacon frying on the stove. She climbed down the ladder. He handed her a cup. "Mornin', Mrs. Brennan. Mornin'." They drank coffee standing at the window. The garden stretched outside, plants heavy with late harvest. The mountains beyond caught the first light, turned purple and gold. "Got work to do," Wyatt said. "North fence needs mendin' before winter." "I'll work the garden. Still got beans to pick." He nodded, set down his cup, pulled on his coat, stopped at the door. "Frances." She turned. "I'm glad you're here." "Me too." He left. She heard Buck's hooves on the packed dirt, fading toward the north pasture. Frances finished her coffee, washed the cups, put on her work dress, the gingham so faded now it was almost white, tied her hair back with a strip of cloth. Outside, Katie was framing walls. The sound of his hammer was steady, rhythmic. She waved. He tipped his hat, kept working. She went to the garden. The morning dew was heavy on the leaves. Her hem soaked through before she'd walked 10 steps. She didn't care. She worked until noon, then walked to the creek for water. The wildflowers were mostly gone now, killed by the first frost 2 weeks back. But the cottonwoods were turning gold, and the water ran clear and cold over smooth stones. She filled her bucket, carried it back. Wyatt came in at dusk, sat in the rocking chair he'd made, watched her work the last row of beans. When she finished, she sat on the porch step beside him. He handed her water from the dipper. She drank. They watched the sun drop behind the mountains. The light changed gold to rose to purple to blue. "Next spring," Wyatt said. "We'll plant those fruit trees. Katie said he'd help dig the holes. Where? South side. Get good sun there." Frances thought about spring, about apple blossoms and cherry trees and the years it would take for them to bear fruit. Years they'd be here, together. "That sounds good," she said. Wyatt reached for her hand. She gave it to him, gave it to. They sat like that while the stars came out, and the temperature dropped, and somewhere an owl called, and the land settled into night. Frances Brennan, not Kessler anymore, looked at the cabin with smoke rising from the chimney. At the garden she'd cleared with her own hands, at the mountains beyond, at the man whose hand held hers. She'd traveled 2,000 miles on a dead man's promise and found a living man's truth instead. She'd come looking for a home and found herself. "Let's go inside," she said. Wyatt stood, pulled her to her feet. They walked into the cabin together. He closed the door behind them. Outside, the land stretched away in every direction, wild, hard, beautiful, theirs. There's something quiet about watching two people find each other when neither was looking. Something tender in the way Frances sat on that wooden crate, letter in her hands, not knowing Wyatt was already on his way. We've all been there in our own fashion, waiting for something promised that never came, or came different than we expected. Many of us know what it feels like to start over in a place that doesn't feel like home yet, to work until our hands blister because the work is all we have to offer, to be judged by people who don't know our story, but think they do. Perhaps you've sat in a church pew feeling the weight of eyes on your back, or stood in a garden watching weeks of labor wash away in a single storm, or loved someone quietly without fanfare or recognition. This story doesn't tie up neat. Francis and Wyatt didn't get a fairy tale, they got mud and hard work and a town that talked. But they got each other. And somehow that was enough. It's allowed to be enough. The unresolved parts, the questions about whether love born from duty can become real, those don't need answers tonight. Some things we carry, some things we build, and we don't always know why they hold. Thank you for sitting with this story. Thank you for staying through the storm and the rebuilding. Thank you for being here.